Today we're going to tie another smallmouth bass fly, a classic sort of that I think is doesn't get the attention due it really. This is the Dahlberg Flashdancer, designed by Larry Dahlberg, uber angler and Wisconsin native, I might point out. Uh, Most people associate Larry with his mega famous diver, the spun deer hair bug that is in use everywhere. This is another one of his that I think is a remarkably effective fly, but it's not available in, I don't know, at least from the very large commercial fly tires that perhaps distribute his diver. So I thought we might take a look at it. His original version was a red-tailed, white chenille, obviously, a pearl overwing, pearl flashabou overwing, and a spun deer hair head. I actually, again, with the waters that I fish that are tend to be tannic stained and so on, I like a gold overwing. Other than that, it's quite a lot the way Larry intended it, I think. And it's a simple fly, kind of a guide fly. Very few materials, inexpensive materials, readily available materials for the most part. So let's give this thing a whirl. First of all, the list of materials. This is again a Gamakatsu SL4L2H streamer hook in size 4. You could probably tie this in 4 through 8 in that series of hooks. I think that the comparable sizes of a Tiemco 5263 would be 4 through 8 as well. We want to make sure that we get this debarbed. If you're wondering why I place such a stress on debarbing hooks, there are really two reasons. It's good for the fish. We don't want to kill our quarry unnecessarily with bleeding gills and so on. And secondly, these are big wind-resistant flies, and often you're fishing 2 people to a drift boat or something like that. And it's surprising just how often you can put one of these into yourself or into your angling companion, and you'll appreciate that it doesn't have a barb at that time. I think that the best way to debarb a hook is to put it in a pair of pliers and roll it back and forth in the smooth jaws of a plier. That gets the barb down and gets barbed down thoroughly, which is important, without cracking it and snapping it off, which can often happen if you use your vise or something. So we'll get that secured in the vise. The rest of our materials are, again, very simple. I like, this is woolly bugger marabou in a bright fluorescent red-orange. A true red will work as well. There's just something I like. I like fluorescent colors. The body is this medium trilobal antron chenille in white. I like the little bit of sparkle that the antron has, and secondly, I think it's a little bit tougher stuff than the traditional rayon chenille. We'll follow that up with a gold flashabou wing, very commonly available material, and then the head of the fly is comprised of spinning deer hair from, in this case, from Blue Ribbon Flies. You can't beat Blue Ribbon Flies in West Montana as a supplier of high quality, well sorted, well specified animal hair on the hide. It's as good as it gets. Our thread is one of my favorites again, the traditional Danville Flymaster Plus in 210. There are other acceptable threads, again, GSP or Vivus 140, something like that. Let's get going. We'll start our thread at about 1/3 of the way back on the shank. That's going to provide both kind of what I like to call an index point, and we're also going to make fairly tight wraps of thread to the back. We want a continuous wraps of the thread here for reasons that I'll show you in a second. We'll make a couple of additional turns at the back to create a little bit of bump to help secure the flashabou, the marabou, excuse me. And it's pretty easy to size this stuff too. It's going to be about the length of the overall hook. So we'll size it with our material hand. Or, as the case may be, our tool hand and change it off to our material hand. It's my attempt to avoid left and right. Then we'll get a little pinch here, take a couple of good tight securing wraps, trim off the excess, trim it fairly short, and then we'll bind that down, clean it up. Start our white chenille. Again, you could pull a little of the fuzz off the core, so you're only tying in the core rather than the bulk of the chenille. It makes for an easier and more secure start. Secondly, we can spin our thread backward a little bit. That'll make it want to jump backward. It'll cord up the thread. It'll make it want to jump backward a little bit to catch your material. Then we're going now the reason for the thread base, we're going to use a little more cyanoacrylate low viscosity glue here. In this case, this is Super Well from JB. The fly tank standard seems to be the Zappa-Gap. But either will work nicely, and this is available at your local lumberyard. We'll coat that a little bit. The reason I'm doing that is to make sure that we lock the chenille to the hook shank. We don't want that wobbling around on there. Clean that out of there. Make good tight wraps. You can kind of pull backward a little bit to make sure that you have those really good tight wraps. We'll come forward to that waiting thread, throw the thread over it to lock it down, trim it away, take a couple of good tight wraps to clean that up and to secure it well. Then it's time for the Flashabou. Again, as I've said before, it's hard to explain exactly how much Flashabou, how much you like, I guess. How stained are your waters? How clear are they? How much action do you want? How much bulk? This is probably something, again, in the area of 25 strands or so. And we'll make that about the overall length of the fly or the body to the tail of the marabou. And again, we can give that a little spin to help us pinch that, get that pinched in. It's not behaving, is it? We'll start over. First of all, we'll get rid of some of the excess. That'll help. There we go. Now we'll trim away all the excess. We can even, if we want, double that back and lock that in too. That might help prevent it from pulling out at a later date. Then we'll trim that flat there. There, finally, a wing. Clean this up a little bit. We'll advance just ahead of that. We're going to add a little bit of, just to make extra certain that the wing stays put and doesn't pull out, we can add a little bit of cyanoacrylate there as well. Then there's on this fly, there's a collar that extends about a third of the way back. If you can see this on the fly, that's to help contain that Flashabou, make sure that it doesn't start to wrap the hook shank and foul around the hook and so on. It's best to stack that hair, which I've done in advance because it's so awfully noisy. I didn't want to do it in front of you folks. But what we would do is take about again a third of a pencil in diameter's worth of it, trim it away from the hide, close to the hide. Then before we can stack it, you'll want to take a comb of some sort, and you'll find that there's a lot of under fur in this. Clean that out of there. That it'll make it easier to tie in, and it can't stack with that under fur locking the individual hairs together. But here we have our stacked deer hair. Probably have a little more than we need. Better than too little. Uh, Give it a little more. And then we want to cover a third to one half of the length of the chenille. And again, we can spin the thread, take one loose gathering wrap here, and then pinch down hard on it, and it'll spin up. And what we're going to do here, this is something that some people disapprove of. We're going to do a spun deer hair head of this, and there are those who say that you ought to get rid of this entirely and not use any of it, that it'll get in the way. But for this fly, I don't think it much matters, and I think that it might help a little bit to have it here. So we'll trim this fairly short to get it a little bit organized at least, and then pull it back against the shank and get a few thread wraps in there to get it out of the way for the next step. You'll notice that we have about 3/16 of an inch of hook shank left. What we're going to do now is take another group of trim more deer hair from the hide. Again, maybe as much as a half pencil's worth to begin with. Trim it off tight to the hide. Clean out the under fur again with this cute little comb. Notice how much fuzz we pulled out of there. Then we only want to spin the constant diameter part of this hair. We don't do the tapers to finer tips. We can just, off camera, cut them out of there. So that we just have the straight hollow portion left. And we'll lay that atop the hook at a 45-degree angle and give the thread another twist. That soft wrap, that hard wrap, and with that hard wrap, we'll just also let go and let it spin around the hook shank until it stops. Wind the thread through it a few times. Compact it a little bit. And then bring our thread forward. Form a tidy little head. Then, again, we'll perform a whip finish here. This hair can be sort of stubborn to get out of the way. So what I'm going to do here is extend the thread over to a horizontal peg on the vise, and use these two fingers and my thumb to retract the deer hair. Create a 5 or 6 turn whip finish. Pull it up. Trim away the thread. Today we'll use some non-toxic fly-tight head cement to protect those finishing wraps a little bit. Put a drop on a bodkin. Pull it back out of the way. There you are. We're not going to trim this fly on camera because it's a fairly long and tedious process, but you want some sort of a bullet head shape. And it can be as small or as large as you want. I've seen some people trim them quite small. This deer hair is sort of buoyant, so getting rid of as much of it as possible will probably make the fly run a little bit deeper. I kind of like to have a little bit of a bulbous head to this. I think that it makes a sonic signature as you draw it through the water. I think that also any of these rounded heads, these spun deer hair heads, are meant to help kick the fly. That if you're stripping this fly toward you and stop, this stops suddenly, while it has these long flowing materials Don't stop so suddenly, so it'll kick the fly from one side or the other and provide a lot of action. Uh, there's your Dahlberg Flashdancer. Uh, One more thing, most of the flies, all the flies that I've been tying in this, you can't call it a series, but there's a sequence of events here, are smallmouth flies. If you're not familiar with the smallmouth bass as a game fish, I think you ought to become familiar with it. They're wonderful game fish, incredibly sporting, though. The hardest fighting fish in freshwater, people will say. Uh, in if You might consider hiring a guide to help you learn about smallmouth fishing. It can be a little daunting to begin with. They're not a fussy fish, but where they are and in the kind of weather they like, the kind of water they like, can be daunting to a beginner. And we're faced with this coronavirus that's forced us into our basements to do silly things like this, and the guides are all small independent businessmen and can really use your bookings right now. I have a list of these folks that it's people that I know and have the pleasure of calling many of them my friends. It's not going to be a complete list because I don't know everyone, and I apologize in advance for those that I've omitted. But you might want to get a hold of Larry and Wendy at Hayward Fly Fishing, or Hunter Dorn at the Wisconsin Fly Fishing Company, Tim Landwehr and his group at Tightlines Fly Fishing, John Edstrom and his associates at Headwaters Fly Fishing, Kip Veith at Wildwood Flow Trips, and Bob Bickford at St. Croix Valley Adventures. Additionally, your local fly shop might have guide services or might be able to direct you to a guide. And the same thing applies to the folks at the fly shops. Again, they're hardworking small business people that have put a lot on the line here and tolerate us while we pick through their goods and drink their free coffee and spend $3 while we pick their brains. So if you're in need of any kind of material or hard goods right now in these tough times, you might want to call those folks up. In my immediate area, we have Lynn's Fly Shop in River Falls, Wisconsin, Bob Mitchell's Fly Shop in St. Paul, Minnesota, the Fly Angler in Fridley, Minnesota, and Men Provisions in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Kindly consider looking those folks up and seeing if you can't do some business with them, all right? In the meantime, stay safe, stay well. I hope we're out from under this soon so we can get out and actually do some fishing. Bye now.